Are you the quantum mechanics?
Yes, we are the quantum mechanics.
Also known as the justified ancients of woo-woo.
If you're interested in the paranormal and the high strangeness, we're the podcast for you.
Whether you're a believer, a doubter, or somewhere in between.
I'm Ben.
And I'm Peter.
And we are the Quantum Mechanics.
We are the Quantum Mechanics. Before we get started, Ben, we've got a new Patreon to talk about. Thank you, Shelton, for joining us at patreon.com/TQM pod. We really appreciate it. We often talk about what you get, but you get the episodes a week early. You get access to our exclusive Patreon-only episode, Ben and Peter's Extra Scoop, Discord server, really good community. More importantly, though, I think it's funny because I was looking at the surveys of why most people join, and most people join just because they want to help support us and, as we say, keep the show on the road. So it's much appreciated. Welcome, Shelton.
Yes, very much so. Thank you. And I think, if I understand our platform properly, this is one of our patrons from Australia, which is very nice.
Excellent.
So I was going to say good day, but that would be a terrible, terrible stereotype.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do that.
Don't do
Even
that.
though the tourist advertisements in this country do feature a kangaroo saying good day.
Okay.
But, does that... Anyway, we'll gloss over all that.
Yeah, we'll gloss over all that. But yes, thank you. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, yes. So speaking of foreign words from beyond this shore, today I am delving into a book which was originally written in Chinese, and it's a fantastic set of stories, but I'm going to apologise in advance
we got
for
a lot
my
of tough
pronunciations. I've done my best. I've anglicised them. If I mess it up and you have spotted that, I am deeply sorry. But speaking of Chinese, did you notice that someone on our Spotify comments, I spoke about a phantom Chinese restaurant that I visited years ago?
Did, yes. I saw the comment and I couldn't remember the context. So
Yes, they said it's this one, and they directed... Well, I had a little search, and I do believe they are correct. So if you look at the Spotify comments, you'll see where this fantastic Chinese restaurant that appeared out of the fog, and for 15 years, myself and my partner have believed it to be a phantom Chinese restaurant. It might just be that we were looking in the wrong place, but...
okay, so it does exist.
It does appear to exist. But actually, let's go to China now. We're going to the Guangxi province, because between the Guangxi province and Hunan live the Kan people. They're also known as the Dong people. And for...
Don't want to press that button, but I did.
For thousands of years, they have believed in rebirth. So there was lots of Chinese traditional belief in spirits, but this goes beyond that, because these people, they don't believe reincarnation is a theory. They call the people who have lived past lives reincarnators, obviously in their local language.
Right.
And there are so many of them in this one specific region called Pingyang that an independent researcher named Dr. Chanzen Li spent years living amongst them just to document this very fact. And he put all of these stories into a book called 100 Cases of Reincarnation Among the Dong People. And we're going to go and have a look at some of those stories today and some of the theories, because they are fantastic.
And do they, is it like a kind of Buddhist tradition where they can reincarnate as animals and humans, or are they always human?
In this case, they're always human. That's a very good point, though. In this case, they're not only humans, but they come back into this province.
Oh, okay.
So they're recycling souls from this area.
Okay.
So the first story I want to go into begins in the early 1960s in a small Kan village called Mengzai. A 12-year-old girl named Anlan Wu was given a small chore by her mother. Her father was out in the rice fields working hard with the oxen, and Anlan's job was to bring him a hot breakfast before it got cold. Anlan was a happy, energetic kid. She grabbed the food and skipped out to the fields. When she found her dad, he was knee-deep in the mud, determined to finish ploughing a stubborn patch of land. Anlan called out to him, but she was just waved off by her dad. He wanted to finish this row.
Don't want me hot food.
I know. Well, it's a bit rude, but Anlan shrugged, put the food down on a rock and waited. Now, while she was waiting, she noticed a large ancient plum tree nearby. Anlan loves plums. Who doesn't?
Yeah.
But all the low-hanging fruit had already been picked clean. If she wanted a plum, she was going to have to climb.
Oh, I can feel what's coming.
So Anlan hoisted herself up, climbing up, branch by branch, till she was about 15 feet off the ground. She grabbed a few ripe plums and started making her way back down. That's where things started to go south. She placed her foot on a thick-looking branch, but the branch was dead. With a sharp crack, the wood gave way and Anlan plummeted 15 feet. Now, kids fall out of trees all the time in these villages. Usually you get a scraped knee, bit of a bruised ego, you laugh it off. But Anlan wasn't so lucky. When the branch broke, a jagged spear-like piece of wood pointed straight upwards from the trunk.
No.
And as Anlan fell, she landed face first right into that jagged piece of wood.
Oh, no.
It impaled her, entered through her right nostril and exited through the back of her neck.
Wow. Oh, God.
Her father heard the crack and the scream and obviously dropped his plough, sprinted over. He found this little girl pinned in the tree. In absolute panic, he pulled her off the wood, cradled her in his arms and ran to a nearby creek, desperately trying to wash the massive wound. But it was no use. Unfortunately, right there in the middle of this paddy field and right by the water, she died in her father's arms. Now, normally, that is where the story ends. A tragic freak accident. But it doesn't end there. Because a few years later, 1969, in another village called Guangdong, about 30 miles away, a woman named Yulang Yang gave birth to a baby girl, and they named her Yushin. As soon as Yushin was born, her father noticed something really odd. The baby had a weird waxy substance near her right nostril, and when they gently washed it away, they found a distinct deep scar about a centimetre long, and when they turned the baby over, they found an identical matching scar on the back of her neck.
Right.
Now, we've heard about these things before, and I have mentioned in the past this idea in some cultures that birthmarks are representative of something that happened in a previous life.
There's a lot of that in Indian culture, is there not?
That's correct, yes. Now, her father, Yushin's father, who fully believed in reincarnation, looked at his wife and said, "I wonder who died and reincarnated in our family." By the time Yushin was 3 years old, she was a very talkative toddler. And one afternoon, her mother, Yong Luan, was sitting on a wooden loom weaving fabric, and little 3-year-old Yushin walked up, crossed her arms, and said, "That's not how my mother weaves." Yong Luan stopped. She looked at her daughter, confused, and said, "But I thought I was your mother. What other mother do you have?" Yushin looked right back at her and said, "I do have another mother. She doesn't live here. She lives in Mengzai." Now, Mengzai is 30 miles away. Yushin had never been there. Her parents had never taken her there. From that day on, the floodgates opened with Yushin. She started talking incessantly about her past life. She told anyone who would listen that her real name was Anlan. She talked about the plum tree. She described in absolute minute detail the sensation of falling, the piercing pain in her face, and how her father cried as he washed her face with the creek water while she died. Like, she tells the whole story in graphic detail. Yushin even retained some of Anlan's old habits. When Yushin was 6, she climbed a tree, slipped and tumbled to the ground. Now, she wasn't hurt, but her mother ran out furious and said, "You already died once climbing trees in your past life. Haven't you learned your lesson?"
Yeah, well, I was thinking that myself. Yeah, wow.
Now, Mengzai was so far away, Yushin's new family had no way to verify her claims. So basically, though it's 30 miles, of course, we're not in a culture that has cars, and there is a set of mountains in between.
So it's I don't know, back then, probably a couple of days' travel or something, or a day at least.
Yeah.
You're not going to do that just to check out this story, are you?
No, of course not. No. I mean, they are living, not necessarily hand to mouth, but they're farmers. They can't afford to leave their land either.
Yeah.
Yushin never forgot, and when she turned 16, she happened to meet a travelling merchant from Mengzai, and she saw her chance. She wrote a letter It said, "Dear Mum and Dad, I was Anlan in my past life. If you are still in this world, please come find me in Guangdong. I reincarnated as a girl named Yushin Yang. Respectfully yours in longing, your daughter Anlan." Imagine, well, two things. Imagine your kid writing that letter.
Yeah.
Is it hurtful? I don't know. Maybe not hurtful, but it's big.
But I think the context of it, though, if that is a belief system in that area, it's not so strange. Do you know what I mean? If like in our culture, if you got that letter, you'd go, "What the heck?" But I think you've already said her family at the moment, her new reincarnated family, if you put it that way, do believe in reincarnation, and if it's a thing in the area, it would shock you, but it's not like you totally out of the blue that somebody would do that.
That is very true. That is very true. And I suppose that's a very interesting point when you juxtapose it with our culture. That would be a crazy thing to do, wouldn't it?
Well, it's funny. I think I've said on the podcast before, my grandmother, who I never met, was a psychic medium. And I remember, in that World War II era, she apparently said she had some message from a sailor, I think, who'd died, and gave her the name and address of his parents and said, "Can you write them a letter?" This is what she claimed came through the spirit, which she did. But the parents didn't receive this very well. I think the police were called and all kinds of stuff.
Wow, the police?
Yeah, it's from my memory. I'm hearing this kind of second or third hand through the family, so I don't know how accurate it is. But she wrote a letter saying, "Look, I have been in contact with your son's spirit form, and he says he's okay and he wants you not to worry," but they didn't take it well.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, we're going to find out what Anlan's family felt, because the merchant did deliver the letter. And a few weeks later, just before the spring festival in the local town, 3 strangers walked into Gondong village. Older woman, older man, younger man. The second Yukshin saw them, she burst into tears and ran towards them, and she flung herself into the old woman's arms. Wow. It was Anlan's mother, her uncle, and her brother-in-law. Yushin had never met these people in her current life, but she instantly recognised them. Anlan's mother didn't recognise Yushin, of course. She was in a different body now.
Yeah.
But she felt undeniably and overwhelmingly maternal towards this 16-year-old, and she realised it was her daughter. So Anlan's family invited Yushin back to Mengzai to visit. When Yushin arrived in the village she had allegedly never been to, she perfectly navigated the dirt roads. She walked straight to Anlan's old wooden house, pointing out specific walkways and windows she used to look out of. She recognised dozens of older villagers by name, and she even recognised Anlan's old classmates who are now grown adults, completely blowing everybody's minds. So if you imagine, she's walked into the village and she's just pointing stuff out that she should never have known. Now, even though they have a culture of reincarnation, this is quite unusual, this behaviour from a 16-year-old.
And again, like given you talks about the distance between the villages and all that stuff, it's not like she could have just gone and had a recce and found all this stuff out to kind of keep an illusion going, does it? She's just chipped up, right? No,
that's right. Yeah. That's right.
Wow.
So the author, he says he believes... Well, he believes this is undeniable proof, the matching scars, the memories of the death. I mean, to be able to completely accurately point out the reason for her climbing, the fact that she could even point out what her father was wearing that day.
Wow.
And he said he can't come, the author says he can't come up with another explanation for it. And, that on the surface of it does seem true, I think.
It raises lots of questions, though, doesn't it, of just... Let's go with it. It's a thing, this reincarnation, whether it's in this region or not. Let's assume it's just in this region, it's a thing. I would imagine that not all people who have been reincarnated in that way remember their past life. So there's questions of why does she remember that? What is different about her? Is it the fact that it was a I don't know, an untimely death. I'm thinking of that spirit thing. There's almost that spirit cliche, isn't there, of unfinished business, or it was such a violent end that that's why they can't pass over as a spirit. All those things are going through my mind. But I'm assuming, I don't know the cultural thing, it's unusual, if it is true, for somebody to remember their past life in that way, right?
It's unusual to remember it in this great detail. And that actually comes on as an interesting talking point later, because sometimes these things are prompted. So you look just like your dead grandmother,
right,
you know, from an early age. And then that becomes part of the lore of that person existing. Oh, your grandmother used to like walking down by the river.
Yeah.
You must be your grandmother. You know, that
she played with her hair that way.
Exactly, exactly right.
Yeah.
So basically, this family is kind of reunited, and she becomes part of that family again. So she's now got two families.
What do we know what her current family thought of all this? I guess it's a cultural thing, but you know, it won't be strange for them.
It was strange, but they allowed it, and they didn't try and prevent it. So this is a long time ago now. I mean, Anne Lan would be in her 70s, 80s by now. No, 70s. And so, you know, time passes and people die. She just had a larger support network. That's the real way of looking at this. She just had more people around her.
It does raise the question, when she passes away this time round, does that mean she comes back again? Or is it a one-shot deal? It's kind of weird, isn't it?
No, well, so part of the research that he did, the author finds the average time between reincarnations is 40 to 60 years. In this case, it was much, much smaller than that. Right. It was about 8 years. But the average time is 40 to 60 years. Now, that is enough time for a deceased person to become, you know, somewhat legendary, you know, your great-grandmother, all of that sort of thing. And again, I'll talk about that later. But they do all seem to come back into this village, and it does seem to be a recycling of souls. Yeah,
right, okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
But let's talk about another interesting case, because this is a different angle on the same idea. Because the Kan people have a very specific burial ritual. When someone dies, the family must tie a cord around the waist of the deceased before they're buried. They believe that when the soul reaches the underworld, the spirits of the dead will grab hold of that cord, hoist the soul up, and weigh them. It sounds very much like the Egyptian idea, doesn't it? The weighing determines your good and bad deeds, which dictates where you will reincarnate next.
Be interesting to know which is which. If you've been bad, do you weigh more or less?
Oh, it's like a set of scales. So you might have remembered from like primary school when you're doing the ancient Egyptians, I can't remember the name of the god, but your heart is weighed against a feather.
Yeah.
And your heart doesn't want to be heavier than the feather.
Right.
Because otherwise it's basically karmic, is what they're trying to say.
Right.
But yes, if you've done more bad deeds, it's a very simple. I think it's partly the Chinese translation into English here. But basically, if you do need to go back and learn more lessons,
right,
or are you such a good person that you can, you know, perhaps move towards doing, you know, you don't need to learn any more lessons. It is a kind of karmic theory. This is what is going on here.
Don't climb plum trees.
Well, yeah, or it could be, you see, in these cases, karma is strange. It could be that the parents are working off some karma there,
right,
and the child is part of their spirit group and therefore has volunteered to play this role so that they experience the loss of their daughter. Right. And that could be why the child reincarnated so quickly, because they were sort of, you know, doing them a favour, if you like. They're doing them a karmic favour.
More of an karmic innocent in the whole thing.
Correct. Yes, absolutely. But they might also be gaining, you know, positive points for helping out these other souls.
Right.
It becomes a very complicated sort of, not necessarily a pyramid scheme, but you know, if the problem.
You're back to the Egyptians again.
Yeah. Oh, I hadn't even thought of that. Yes. But here's the thing: karma, I think, is very difficult to explain, because if I go and, what do I pick? I murder someone at the side of the road because of a road rage incident, then karma would say, well, I then get murdered by that soul by the side of the road and we're evens. But it doesn't quite work out that way because of the various circumstances that led to it. The motivations of the individuals around it isn't simply the action, it's like the reasons people do things. So it might be that actually there is a positive karma coming about from killing someone by the side of the road, but you don't know because all of that memory is wiped from you when you are incarnated. So it's anyway.
I thought we agreed we'd never talk about that.
It's always going to come out, isn't it? At some point.
Yeah, you can't help it.
Sometime in the mid-20th century, a Cam woman gave birth to a baby named Beinio. Tragically, little Beinio was sick and she died when she was just 2 weeks old. Obviously, the mother was completely devastated and blinded by grief, she prepared her tiny baby for burial. But in her crying and panic, she forgot to tie the cord around the baby's waist.
No. Right.
According to Cam legend, the soul of baby Beinio was descended into the underworld, and when she arrived, the spirits of the dead approached her with their massive scales to weigh her deeds, but there was no cord to grab onto. So in their confusion, the spirits had to weigh her anyway, those were the rules, but they had nothing to hook onto. So with kind of, and this is the way it is described by the author, bureaucratic indifference, they grabbed the massive sharp iron hook off the scale and shoved it right through the baby's upper lip.
Ooh.
The hook tore right through the infant's lip. Bearing in mind, this isn't real. This is what they believe.
Yeah.
The baby obviously screams, and undeterred, the spirits grabbed the hook, shoved it through a second time, and again the flesh tore. They finally managed to weigh her, and because she was an innocent baby, she was cleared for immediate reincarnation.
Oh, thanks.
So
that's almost the equivalent of the witch drowning thing, isn't it? If they drown, they're not a witch, so great.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Well, okay.
But
surely they can work out a different method for doing this than that. It sounds very complicated.
The way I measure my dog is I get on the scales, measure me,
and then hold him.
Yeah, and I subtract one from the other.
Yeah.
And the scales say one at a time, please. No, they don't do that. This is a strange legend to come up with because we're now saying the gods use an iron hook. Well, at least the judges in the underworld have an iron hook. But anyway, not so long after, in a neighbouring village, a Han Chinese family gave birth to a baby boy called Jingbo.
I know what's coming. Right.
When the doctor handed the baby to the mother, she gasped because the boy was born with horrific, gaping, double-cleft palate.
Right.
His upper lip was split open in two very distinct places, and exactly where the hook from the underworld had torn through baby Beinio's face. Now, Zhengbo grew up with this severe disfigurement. The bullying was really bad, so he dropped out of school. He spent his entire childhood hiding in his house, miserable and obviously trying to cover his face. Eventually, as an adult, he managed to get surgery to correct his lips. But, of course, this is going to stay with you psychologically. But Zhengbo remembered. As soon as he could talk, he remembered being Beinio. He remembered the dark, terrifying underworld. He remembered the agonizing pain of the cold iron hook tearing through his face because they didn't have a cord. Now, Dr. Lee documented that Zhengbo travelled to the Cam village to find his past life mother, the woman who had buried Beinio. When he found her, though, it wasn't a tearful, happy reunion. Zhengbo was furious. He confronted this elderly woman and screamed at her, berating her for forgetting the burial cord. He told her in brutal detail what the underworld spirits had done to him and just how this careless mistake had cursed him into a lifetime of disfigurement, bullying, and suffering.
God, I wonder how that helped her deal with her grief, but not at all.
Well, she fell to her knees, weeping, begged forgiveness from the young man.
Did she realise she'd not put the cord round?
She did, yes, she did. And she had felt guilty about it ever since. Right. And she felt a real sort of guilt for doing this. But when she was confronted by this guy coming back and saying, "You did this to me," then, you know, she relived it all again. But she accepted that it was her fault. And she eventually embraced this guy as her lost child. And again, it's a strange case where he ends up with two mothers. And there's the one that caused his problem, and there's the one that helped him solve the problem, because it was his current incarnation mother who'd helped him put together the money to actually get this surgery. Right. So he ends up in this strange place again of having two families, but, you know, obviously the difference is this family caused this terrible thing to happen to him. But this is a bit of an outlier with this particular bunch of people, because quite often they don't remember what happened in the underworld. Usually it is just a past life experience, and then that is what is remembered. Oh, yes, I remember this road. I remember this house. And that is what a lot of this book is full of, is these stories of unbelievable rememberings. And really, that is what they are. They seem to be like there's a few cases of, this person was my mother, this person was my brother. There's one fascinating case where a child comes back and points out the murderer, the person that killed him in the past life. Now, this child is 6 years old. He comes back, says, look, I was killed. These two men jumped me with an iron bar. They tried to rob me, but they did rob me, but they also killed me. Goes back to the village where this happened. These two men that did it to him are not that much older now, because he's only 6 and he reincarnated very, very quickly. Right. Does it so convincingly that a judge actually...
really?
Yeah, they go to prison.
Wow.
For murdering the previously incarnated child. And
I would hope there was slightly more evidence than the word of a reincarnated 6-year-old, but...
There was not.
Oh.
No.
Ooh, okay.
This is part of the problem with this whole thing.
Really scary.
So what this child was able to do was point out in such detail the events of that night that were known, and then point to these two people who were under some suspicion anyway. Okay. But then they secure a conviction. But as you say, that is really, really dangerous. Yeah. It was just, it's a mixture of the belief of the people and the incredulity of, the judge who was confronted with, look, you can bring justice to me by convicting these people. Now, they didn't go, from what I understand from the documentation here, it wasn't like they were given a life sentence. They went to prison for like maybe 5 years. But even so, that's quite, it's, as you say, it's not great. Yeah. Now, how do we explain all of this? Because I think this is the interesting thing. We can talk about how people have got matching scars until the end of time. But Dr. Lee's research, is it coincidence? Is it cultural conditioning? Or is it just straight up hoaxes? Now, Dr. Lee argues that in a region where everyone believes in reincarnation, families unknowingly feed details to children who make up imaginary friends. So there's two parts to this. One is what I was talking about before. You look so much like your grandmother. Yeah. And then
which doesn't make sense, because some of these cases don't.
No, they don't. No.
I mean, I get the kind of scarring or things that have, issues with birthmarks and whatever. But that's a different thing to, you've got her eyes or your nose or whatever look. And also it's hard to kind of match those two things, isn't there? Because in a way, they should look like the person if they've got the scars. Why are the scars there? But there's a lot going on, isn't there?
There is. So there's one theory. So I must say, Dr. Lee doesn't really settle with any one particular theory, but this is quite interesting, the way that he describes this mechanism might work. So it's possible that Yushin had overheard a merchant talking about this tragedy in Mengzai. It would be the sort of thing that people would talk about, and it would also serve as almost a moral tale for parents to be cautious about their children climbing trees, which would be common practice anyway. Right. Because these children are shown and taught from such an early age that they are going to be a reincarnated person, they start to build so the direct translation from Dr. Lee is an imaginary friend. So I'm not talking about like my imaginary yak friend. They start creating a persona which they eventually absorb as their own. Right. So they start going, I wonder if I could possibly be the the reincarnation of that girl who died on the plum tree, because I really do love plums.
Well, even I was thinking even more literal than that. You hear this story, there is a culture of belief in this thing, and this kid could go, well, that explains my scarring. That scarring could be a complete coincidence, right? But actually now you've got a story that kind of backs up why you have this scarring.
Yeah, no, exactly. This is very true. And it's possible that... well, okay, so let's talk about the scarring, because this phenomena of reincarnation birthmarks, it is documented worldwide. But there's a guy called Dr. Ian Stevenson at the University of Virginia. He found hundreds of cases where children who remembered violent past deaths had birthmarks or deformities that matched the fatal wounds perfectly.
Right.
So is it feasible that what we're doing is not just seeing, okay, so Dr. Lee can write this off as they've got a imaginary friend story that they're building. They absorb that as a persona. We will have to leave it as a freak mystery that they can remember parts of their house that they've never been in as that incarnation. But Dr. Ian Stevenson says that there is an absolute correlation between violent previous deaths and these birthmarks. So a lot of his case studies are people who have suffered at the hands of war. So he studied people who, in a past life regression, claimed to have been part of a battle in the Civil War, for example. There's also a really remarkable case of a World War II pilot who loses an arm during their death in a fighter plane, and the child that reincarnates back has a birthmark which covers the entirety of the arm that was missing. And they have difficulty with their fingers on that arm. They have to have basically reconstructive surgery to rebuild the muscles at the end of their hand. And the strangest thing about it is that where the body of the airman that was recovered, where the arm is severed, it matches exactly the scar, the birthmark line on the child, and that birthmark appeared. Well, as it would suggest, from the very moment that baby existed. Now, that is very hard to come to terms with, particularly as the child, when regressed later in life, gave the correct name of the airline pilot, but not just the pilot, but also the co-pilot. He said his name was Jack, and that can be traced back to an exact incident that happened in World War II in an American fighter bomber plane. So there are cases like that where you kind of mix the idea of regression and past lives and all of the problems that might bring trying to explain it, and also this physical thing adds a second element to it as well. It's possible that Dr. Ian Stevenson says that this might be a genetic memory, so trauma that is so severe that an intense bioelectrical shock of the violent death somehow imprints on a developing fetus somewhere in the world. So he kind of has this idea of, we've spoken about universal resonance before, and just to remind everybody, probably the biggest experiment that was ever taken place on that. So the idea is that, for example, the petrol engine is invented in 3 different places at the same time. But it was an experiment done by the BBC in, I believe, the late 1970s, where they went to onto the streets with, those pictures that are used to determine whether people are colourblind. So it's a picture made up of blots.
Yeah, you get the number. You've got to recognise the number, yeah.
That's right. So they go onto the streets, show this picture, say, what is this a picture of? And X number of people get it correct. It's actually a picture of Jesus, so it would be universally known. But it's not easy to spot. So let's say 50% of people get it. Then on television, they broadcast and say this is a picture of Jesus. Then they go back onto the streets in a place where the television transmission could not have been seen, and there is a statistically higher percentage of people that get the picture of Jesus correctly interpreted. And so this is what is known as the resonance theory. Now, there are loads of reasons why this can be debunked. That particular experiment, it's not a lab condition, but that's very hard to debunk. Other questions about resonance can be more easily debunked, but I don't want to get hung up on that. The idea that Dr. Stevenson is putting forward is that whatever mechanism may cause resonance may also cause these traumas to carry forth into other fetuses, into a fetus, for a reason that we don't understand. Now, there was a good experiment that is referred to in the notes of this book that I think I've brought up before, but there was a scientist who trained baby rats to be, or just rats actually, to be scared of the smell of roses by electrocuting them. And then eventually a rat that had never smelt roses or been electrocuted turned out to be scared of the smell of roses. Yep. And so that had been passed on genetically. So maybe what we're looking at here is some kind of mechanism where a past life trauma can be passed on to such an extent that it also passes on some kind of birthmark. Now, obviously, not everybody in Dr. Lee's book has these birthmarks. Sometimes it is just they remember their past life so much, but the idea that it's so focused on this set of people is the reason why he wrote the book. At the end, as I said, he's unable to debunk the whole thing, and this village is convinced that this is what is happening. These souls are coming back.
But there is a cultural element to this, because I mean, you're right. There is a thing that is called generational trauma, right, which be handed down. I don't think I've heard of it taking a kind of physical manifestation, but it's an interesting thing to explore. But the one thing I was thinking, though, if the culture there is very into this as a concept, there is a danger that children, anyone, looks for those patterns and finds them, right?
Yes, this is the great danger of looking for something which appears to exist but doesn't.
Yeah. And
I think that is kind of what Dr. Lee is saying could be happening here.
Because you must feel special that you've had it as well.
Of course.
So, hey, I can have two families and I can have, I'm not saying people do it deliberately, there's any deception there, but on a subconscious level, it might make someone feel special, and a bit of that kind of debunking thing that we talked about with the miracle of the sun.
Yes, absolutely. So the one of the things that struck me whilst I was reading about this was you did an episode maybe 18 months ago about a Scottish island where everybody is a seer.
Yeah.
And that again is part of their culture. And we didn't really go into it, but that idea of like, if you are born on an island where you are amongst people who say that they are seers, does that mean that you either say that you are because you want to fit in, but you don't really feel anything? Or perhaps it enables you to develop a skill which we could all develop, but because you're around people who accept it, that is brought to the fore. And again, that is considered by Dr. Lee as something here, which is like, in cultures where reincarnation is not accepted, it is that the child is kind of told to be quiet or ignored or giggled at, and therefore the memory goes away. Nobody then continues to say to them, oh, you used to remember that you were this person in a past life. You should develop that and don't forget your ancestors and all of that. It's a very different story. I think I told you about my stepmother who, when her daughter was born, she used to talk about how she was relaying what sounded like she was a member of the brown shirts in Nazi Germany, and seeing people shot. She was talking about the men with the sticks that go bang and everybody falls over. And she was like, oh my goodness, I really do hope that my daughter wasn't, part of this terrible action in Nazi Germany. But the story sounded, what the child was saying sounded convincing to her. But when she stopped talking about it, she certainly wasn't reminded by it. She wasn't of it, rather. She wasn't brought photographs of, the brown shirts or anything like that.
Yeah.
So it goes away. If she had lived in this particular village, perhaps, hopefully it wouldn't have been such a dark memory, but perhaps that would have been spoken about.
And then you get into that looking for patterns, don't you, again? You know,
Yeah.
Oh, my God, that must prove that, I had that thought. I thought this, that must prove. Yeah, so it's interesting. But I think you're right that, is it, it's a cultural thing, so you try and fit in, or is it a cultural belief that opens up something that you can tap into that other people can't? Really interesting question, that. The other thing I thought about this, it could be a different paranormal phenomenon of people telepathically, we talked about Vallée and Carl Jung, of this kind of connected universe in a way. Are people telepathically tuning in to other people's life stories or griefs or stuff like that, and then they adopt it? So it's not that they're reincarnated, they're almost, telepathically mind reading something. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, very possibly. And yes, and it's being misinterpreted
as reincarnation,
yes.
right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that is kind of almost slightly what Dr. Stevenson is saying in a roundabout way, in that, if you followed his logic to its ultimate conclusion, you end up falling at a universal consciousness for humans, because that trauma is transmitted back to a central node, if you like, if we're talking, almost computing about it.
But I was thinking, if you take it from a Western, let's say a more kind of British and American centric point of view, if we had a different belief system, mediums, spiritual mediums, may be considered or believe themselves that what's coming through to them isn't a spirit, but it's a memories of a past life.
Yeah, correct.
You know what I mean?
Correct.
The stories would probably still be the same.
Yes.
Whether it's reincarnation or, it's the spirit coming to me,
Yeah. And that, again, that sounds very much like Hungry Ghosts that I covered. And funnily enough, whilst I was researching this, it didn't really fit into this particular story. I've got another story to tell you in a moment, but in that Hungry Ghosts area, I was reading an account of somebody who had contacted someone on a Ouija board, and not only did they contact them on the Ouija board, but they managed to make a connection with them via an EVP. And do you remember when we did the EVP episode with Dr. Radovich, who was coming through telephones? So he had been an EVP researcher, and then 60 years later he was coming through telephones.
Yep.
It's very similar to that. But this person wasn't an EVP researcher they were bringing forth. And the commentary around it from somebody who had started investigating this case very skeptically, their conclusion was that the person speaking through the Ouija board and the EVP was not the voice of the actual dead person, but it was some kind of dark, and I hesitate to say demonic, but a dark entity that was impersonating this person. And so that's when we get on to, dark tricksters and white hat tricksters, I suppose. And that did occur to me with this as well, that these people might be being fooled by some kind of dark entity because, for whatever reason, it's playing with them. And that's a darkened a view that only I have come to through reading this. That's not Dr. Lee's view, but I think that's an interesting sort of thought process. I'm going to tell, when in the Extra Scoop, I actually made a television program about children who remembered past lives. I'm going to tell you a story about that in the Scoop.
Oh, I thought you meant you'd done that this week.
No. I made that. It never actually. It was a pilot for Sky. It went out.
Right.
Sorry, never went out. It was made in about 2009, but I spent a lot of time with the parents and a very young child who had remembered a past life, and I have never told that story before, so wow. I'll tell you that in the Extra Scoop. I will tell you now about another story which adds another angle from this group of people, because this one is much more modern. This child, Yu Yuan, was born on December the 1st, 2011, in another small village in the Longsheng region, which is relatively close to where we're talking about. And from the moment that he could speak, he was terrified of cars. You probably know how this is coming, it was going. But if a truck drove past the village, he would scream, he'd cover his face, hide behind his mother's legs. But they lived in his parents lived in a quiet rural area. He'd never been in an accident, never even been in a truck. But when Yu Yan was about 4 years old, he said to his mother that he died when he was 30. The car was going too fast. Now, she asked him what he meant, and he explained that his real name was Su Yan Wu. He said he had been out drinking one night, having a good time, decided to drive home. He remembered blinding headlights, screech of tyres, crunch of metal, and then darkness. And he said he remembered feeling his body being crushed inside the vehicle. Now, Dr. Lee investigated his claim, and he dug into local records, went to the neighbouring towns, and sure enough, he found the family of a 30-year-old man named Su Yan Wu, who died in a horrific drunk drive accident a short time before Yu Yan was born. When little Yu Yan was brought to Su Yan's family, he knew details about the crash, the car, the previous life's friends that a toddler from a different village really couldn't possibly know. And the trauma of that violent, sudden death bypassed whatever filters basically are supposed to wipe out a soul's memory. This is what Dr. Lee reckons. And the terror of the crash had been passed directly into this new body. But even that pales into comparison with another case that Dr. Lee has. It's his case number 19, the story of Wu Yong. Because this is fascinating and tragic because it involves the concept of souls staying together in these lifetimes. When Wu Yong was a very young child, she started having these night terrors. She'd wake up screaming, clutching her chest and her stomach, begging for someone to try and stop this pain. As her vocabulary developed, she started telling her parents this really dark story. She told them in her past life her name was Fu Fengquin, and more importantly, she remembered exactly how that life had ended. She had been murdered. She remembered the attack in a visceral, terrifying way. There was a sudden ambush, agonising pain, and realisation that she was going to die. What made this recount so blood-curdling was the fact it wasn't just she who died. She was forced to watch her partner, her wife in that past life, be brutally murdered alongside her. So it was a dual murdering.
Right.
And when Dr. Lee interviewed the child, Wu Yong could describe the layout of the house they were attacked in. She could describe the overwhelming grief and panic of her soul leaving her body, desperately trying to hold on to the soul of her murdered partner. And she claims that they both left their bodies at the same time, and she remembers the pair of them going into the afterlife. Now, Dr. Lee says when two people die violently together, their souls can become entangled. The sheer terror and desperation creates this spiritual tether. Wu Yong wasn't just remembering her own murder, she was carrying the murder of two people. And Dr. Lee notes that in these cases of violent murder, the reincarnated children often show symptoms of severe PTSD from day one. They flinch at loud sounds, just like the child with the truck. They're hypervigilant. They sometimes even harbour deep, unexplainable hatred for certain types of people, specific locations, completely unprompted by their current life experiences. So in these two particular cases that I have explained, the Dr. Lee brings up this idea that it comes from Tibetan Buddhism of the bardo, which is an immediate state between death and rebirth. And these Tibetan Buddhists believe that a normal soul will spend up to 49 days in the bardo, processing their previous life, shedding their ego, waiting for a fresh start. But the violent death shatters this bardo process. It's like being shot out of a cannon. The soul doesn't get to rest. It doesn't get to process any of this. It's violently ejected from one body and immediately magnetically pulled into a new fetus, which carries all this raw data and trauma with it. So the birthmarks and the phobias and the memories, they're essentially spiritual scar tissue that hasn't had time to heal in this Bardo process. And so in that particular explanation for those two characters that we heard there, Dr. Lee is saying that in this case, the established ideas in Tibetan Buddhism actually can be used to explain what is going on here. You know, he uses it just as not saying, again, that this is the case for everything. It's just a theory that he puts forward. But it is quite interesting that it is always associated with this violent death and very quick reincarnation. As I've said, he reckoned 40 to 60 years for most people, but in these violent cases, sometimes it can be instantaneous. Not always, as we heard with the girl who'd fallen through the plum tree, as I said, sort of 8-ish years. But in these two cases, it seemed immediate.
But if we go back to the train of thought that I had a little while ago, you know, we've done a few episodes with research into psi and telepathy and premonition, and these things in the laboratory tests seem to work better. You know, we did that one with kind of violent images or sexual images or things where you are kind of hyper aroused in terms of the content you're watching, you know, those lab experiments we've talked about, which is interesting because if there is a connection with, let's say, violence or a violent death or something like that, and the ability of telepathy, this could be, again, what we're talking about here, that somehow maybe this violent death or at the point of violent death, that, you know, some kind of signal is put out there and these people are not reincarnated. They're just really good, you know, radio receivers who are picking these things up. Because you would then experience the trauma as well, because you're picking up something in the universe that is equated with something that's kind of violent or sad or whatever.
Yeah, that's true. And yeah, but okay. So, but what does that tell us about the nature of the universe? I mean, that's the weird thing, because I accept all of that, but it's very curious about what ultimate conclusion you go to.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you reckon? I'm going to avoid saying simulation and, you know, replaying characters here, because that is one thing, but that idea of a universal consciousness kind of...
Well, again, I think it's something we've touched on before, but it's interesting, the research for the next episode I'm doing, there is this, there was one belief in a scientist that I was reading about who believed that, you know, telepathy, psychic ability, psi as we'd call it, is basically almost a Neanderthal or prehistoric, not prehistoric, but Neanderthal type trait that we needed to survive. And then as things have developed, we don't need it so much. So it's basically, could it be something we've lost? And at times of extreme stress or that connected with, you know, these kind of violent events, that somehow that gets opened up in us. So it's something can do, almost like a fight or flight mechanism. Do you know what I mean? It's something that we've had, but we've lost the ability in.
Yeah, I agree.
And who knows what's going on, but I quite like that as an idea, because, you know, we've talked about, you know, that I remember when you were doing the episode we did about the Green Man in the bushes and things like that, of, you know, we know that we have this inherent pareidolia effect because, you know, back in the day, that's what we used to survive. We had to be able to spot the lion in the trees. And I wonder if this is actually tapping into something that we did have before but have lost along the way or don't need as much anymore.
Yeah, don't climb plum trees, you know, because they will kill you. Don't go drunk driving. Yeah, I mean, those violent deaths do make you remember a lesson, I guess.
But maybe on some telepathic, even precognition, or I can't remember, what's the other one? The postcognition, looking back. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That you're tapping into something. Who knows what? I find that easier to accept than, hold on a second, so when you die, you've still got to wait for your thing to go around your waist, and then you stick in you're in a holding area for 45 days to kind of repair your soul, and then they decide whether you get reincarnated or not. That sounds a lot more complicated to me.
Well, the problem, of course, with
and I know that's a cultural or a religious or a spiritual belief. I'm not belittling it.
No, I know you're not. No. But the problem with that cord around the waist is that culture does it. Our culture doesn't.
Yeah.
What
does that mean?
That should mean that every baby in our culture is weighed by having a thing put through their lip.
Well, and
which
also,
doesn't happen.
Yeah, and also, so how does that process work? Is there a cooling off period where the weighing doesn't happen because you've got to be buried? Because you don't die with a cord around your waist.
No. Well, I mean, that's how you're buried. Yeah. I see what you mean. Yeah.
So do they go? Oh, we'll have to wait for the burial to see if it's got the cord.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. Yes.
And if it's got the cord, then we can weigh it. If not, we'll get the hooks out. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Dr. Lee doesn't actually even bring that up. Yeah. That's interesting.
Yeah. And then the other one that you're saying, it's like, oh, you've got to be in this kind of holding area. It's a bit Beetlejuice, isn't it? You're kind of waiting in the holding area for the next stage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It is weird. And the thing is, whatever is described to be the correct thing to do in inverted commas only works in that local culture, of course.
Yeah.
And so that does imply that there's a particular thing that's happening to those people. Either it is like one of these belief things, or there is an external force on there acting either positively or negatively. I mean, so many of these flaming stories go back to if it isn't a simulation or one of the more exotic explanations, it's tricksters.
But also, I wonder if a lot of what we're talking about, these processes, these beliefs, come from a place of trying to explain something we don't understand. So there's something there, but we have to put these things together. It's a bit like the kid who thinks they've had a past life and have all this information. You might come to a conclusion of, well, how do they know that information? They must be in the reincarnation of that person. Whereas, as I was saying earlier, we would go, they've got medium-like qualities or telepathic-like qualities. That's the way we'd frame it.
That's right.
And none of that negates that there is something going on.
Yeah. That's true. I mean, I think I don't know, I'm a very broad generalisation here, but I think in our culture, I think we broadly say that children can see things that adults can't. I think that is something that I hear friends with babies say, regardless of whether they are religious, atheist, whatever. I do hear people say that, whether it is because their baby giggles at the corner of the room and, there's nothing there or whatever it is. But, I have said to people, does your child seem to remember things or say peculiar things about having lived before? And a lot of parents that I know have said, when they could first talk, they used to talk about, a common one would be my other mummy. That is one that has come up in my friend group more than once. And then when quizzed on it, the child might say, my other mummy wears this and that, but that was in a different house, different time. And then when really pushed on it, they go quiet. And I think what happens then is the parents are like, they just, they're fantasizing. They've seen something on television, or they've heard somebody else call somebody else mummy, and they've misunderstood it. But I do find that fascinating. But
that also would make sense if a child was tapping into some universal consciousness. They would interpret it that way. Maybe.
Yeah, they would. Yeah, totally right. Yeah.
Wow.
Well, in the extra scoop, as I say, we're going to talk about a baby who did remember things, and this is not third hand because I was there when, obviously with his parents, but I did observe some strange things which has given me more interest in this particular area. But yeah, we'll talk about that
Brilliant.
on the Extra Scoop, and you can join us over there at patreon.com/TQM pod. If you do it for no other reason, do it to help us out. And we would very much like some more conversation happening on our Discord server. There's lots of people there who are very eager to have conversations, so let's go and get that group as lively as it can be.
Cool.
And
well, next week, Ben's taking us to communist China this week. I am taking us to Cold War communist Russia next week.
very good. Well,
I mean, not
don't know
literally.
what that tells us, but
no, we're not time travelling back there, but I have some.
there's some crazy stories come out of Russia.
Well, it's an episode about how during the Cold War there was a little bit of a kind of supernatural arms race, and I'm going to be exploring what the Russians were up to.
Very good. Thank you very much. Well, if you're listening to us on the paid for feed, we're about to enter a week of very hot weather. If you're listening to us on the free feed, we've had a week of very hot weather. I hope you stay cool or remained cool, whichever applies, and I'll see you at the other side.
See you later.
Take care. Goodbye.
Bye.
Are you the quantum mechanics?